The rule is simple. When you're running alone in Central Park after sunset and you hear footsteps behind you, don't look back, no matter what. Because if you do, it sees you. And once it sees you, it never stops running. My name is Jade Whitmore, and I'm 26 years old. I moved to Manhattan 8 months ago from Portland to work as a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic on the Upper East Side. The pay was great, the apartment was tiny, but mine, and Central Park became my sanctuary. Every evening after work, I'd lace up my running shoes and do a 5-mile loop through the park. It was the only time my mind went quiet, the only time the stress of the city melted away. I always ran the same route: enter at East 72nd Street, head north along the East Drive, cut through the Ramble, loop around the reservoir, and exit at East 79th. 45 minutes of pure escape. I'd done it hundreds of times, knew every turn, every hill, every landmark. The park was as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. 3 weeks ago, I broke the rule I didn't even know existed. And now I can't stop running, because the moment I do, it catches up. It started on a Tuesday in early October. The days were getting shorter, and by the time I finished work at 6:30, the sun was already setting. I should have skipped my run, should have gone straight home, but I'd had a brutal day dealing with a marathon runner who'd torn his ACL and blamed me for his pain. I needed to blow off steam. I needed the park. I changed in the clinic bathroom, stuffed my work clothes in my gym bag, and headed out. The air was crisp and cool, perfect running weather. Leaves were starting to turn, painting the park in shades of amber and crimson. By the time I entered at 72nd Street, the streetlights were flickering on, and the foot traffic was thinning out. Most people were heading home for dinner. Smart people. I popped in my earbuds, queued up my running playlist, and started my warm-up jog. The first mile was perfect. My breathing fell into rhythm, my muscles loosened, and my mind started to empty of the day's frustrations. This was what I needed. This was home. But as I approached the Ramble, that winding, heavily wooded section of the park where the paths get confusing and the trees block out most of the light, something felt off. The usual evening crowd of dog walkers and tourists had vanished. I was completely alone on the path, which was unusual, but not alarming. Sometimes you get lucky and catch the park in a quiet moment. I kept running, following my familiar route through the Ramble's twisting paths. The trees here grow thick and close, creating a canopy that blocks out the sky. Even with the street lamps, this section is always darker than the rest of the park. Shadows pool in the undergrowth, and the city noise fades to a distant murmur. That's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Not the casual pace of a walker, but the steady rhythm of another runner. Matching my pace exactly. I didn't think much of it at first. Runners are territorial about their routes, and it's not uncommon for someone to follow the same path. But something about these footsteps bothered me. They were too perfectly synchronized with mine. Every time my left foot hit the pavement, I heard an echo. Every stride matched. It was like listening to my own footfalls played back with a half-second delay. I sped up slightly, testing. The footsteps sped up too. Still matching. Still echoing. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was New York City. There were always people around. Someone was just running the same route at the same pace. Coincidence. Nothing more. But then my music cut out. Not like the battery died or the connection dropped. It just stopped mid-song, replaced by dead silence in my earbuds. I pulled one out, irritated, planning to check my phone. That's when I realized the footsteps behind me had stopped too. The moment my music died, they disappeared. Complete silence. No footfalls. No breathing. No rustling of leaves or distant traffic. Nothing. Just an unnatural quiet that pressed against my eardrums like water pressure. I slowed to a walk, my heart rate spiking for reasons that had nothing to do with exercise. Something was very wrong. I could feel it in my gut, that primitive instinct that kept our ancestors alive on the savannah. Predator nearby. Danger close. I turned around. The path behind me was empty. No other runner in sight. Just the darkening trail winding back through the trees, street lamps casting pools of sickly yellow light every 30 feet or so. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. Something just out of sight, hiding in the shadows between the lamps. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and stupid in the silence. No response. Of course not. I was alone, just a paranoid woman in a dark park jumping at shadows like a child afraid of the dark. I turned back around and started running again, faster this time. I wanted out of the ramble, wanted to reach the reservoir where the paths were wider and better lit. My music still wouldn't play, but I didn't care. I just wanted to finish my loop and get home. The footsteps started again immediately, but this time they were closer. Much closer. And they weren't matching my rhythm anymore. They were faster. Heavier, closing the distance with impossible speed. I ran harder, my breathing turning ragged. The path curved sharply to the left, and I took the turn at full sprint. Behind me, the footsteps didn't slow for the curve. They came on relentlessly, and now I could hear something else mixed with them. A sound that wasn't quite breathing, but wasn't quite anything else either. A wet, rattling sound like air being pulled through a throat that didn't quite work right. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to look back, to see what was chasing me, to confront the threat instead of running blind. But some deeper, older instinct kept my eyes forward. Don't look. Just run. I burst out of the ramble onto the wider path around the reservoir, and the streetlights suddenly seemed brighter. The sounds of the city rushed back in, car horns and sirens, and the ambient noise of 8 million people living on top of each other. Reality flooded back. The footsteps stopped. I kept running for another 100 yards before I dared to slow down and look behind me. The path was empty. A few evening walkers strolled along the reservoir, but none of them were near me. None of them had been running. Whatever had been chasing me through the ramble was gone. I doubled over, hands on my knees, gasping for air. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Adrenaline made my hands shake. I pulled out my phone to check the time, thinking maybe I'd only been running for 20 minutes, that I'd panicked and cut my workout short. 43 minutes. I'd been running for 43 minutes. Almost my full loop. But I had no memory of the last 20 minutes. No memory of leaving the ramble, reaching the reservoir, or running most of the way around it. Just a blank space where time should have been. I walked the rest of the way to the exit, glancing behind me every few seconds. Nothing. Nobody. Just normal people in a normal park having a normal evening. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Low blood sugar, maybe. I'd skipped lunch, and my body had probably hit a wall. Combined with stress and fatigue, I'd worked myself into a panic over nothing. The footsteps were probably just echoes off the trees. The silence was just my earbuds malfunctioning. The missing time was just exhaustion making me lose track. I ate a huge dinner, took a long shower, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow I'd laugh about this. But when I closed my eyes, I dreamed of running. Endless running through dark paths that twisted back on themselves, footsteps always behind me, getting closer and closer. And in the dream, I made the mistake I'd avoided in real life. I looked back. What I saw standing there on the path, illuminated by a street lamp that cast no shadow, was not human. It had the shape of a runner, the posture of someone mid-stride, but the proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, legs bent at angles that shouldn't work. And its face, God, its face was just a blank expanse of pale skin, stretched too tight over a skull that was almost but not quite the right shape. It saw me looking. I watched its head tilt to the side, processing. Then it smiled, and the smile split its face wider than any mouth should open, revealing rows of teeth that looked like they'd been filed into points. "Found you," it said in a voice that echoed like it was speaking from the bottom of a well. I woke up screaming. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've tried everything to avoid going back to the park. I run on treadmills at the gym. I bike to work instead of walking through the park. I take the long way around to avoid even seeing the trees. But it doesn't matter, because whatever that thing was, whatever I saw when I looked back in my dream, it followed me out of the park. I see it sometimes in my peripheral vision, standing at the end of my street when I leave my apartment, watching from across the subway platform, always in the distance, always still, always waiting. And every night I have the same dream, running through the Ramble, footsteps behind me, that wet, rattling breath getting closer. And every night I look back, and every night it smiles and says, "Found you." Yesterday morning, I woke up exhausted, like I'd been running all night. My running shoes were by the door, covered in dirt and leaves. I don't remember putting them there. I don't remember leaving my apartment at all. But there was a note on my kitchen table, written in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite right. The letters were too tall. The angles too sharp. You can't outrun what you've already seen. But you can try. Meet me tonight. The Ramble. Midnight. We'll run together. I know I shouldn't go. I know that's what it wants. But I'm so tired of running during the day only to run all night in my dreams. I'm tired of seeing it everywhere I look. I'm tired of being afraid. So tonight, I'm going back to Central Park. Back to the Ramble. Back to where this started. Maybe if I face it, it'll stop. Maybe if I confront it on its own terms, I can end this. Or maybe I'll just become another urban legend, another missing person poster stapled to a tree, another story that runners tell each other to explain why you should never jog alone after dark. Another victim who broke the rule and looked back. But I have to know. I have to understand what it wants. Why it chose me. It's 11:30 p.m. now. I'm lacing up my running shoes. My phone is charged. I've left a note for my roommate explaining where I've gone, just in case. And I'm trying not to think about the fact that my running shoes are already dirty, already covered in the evidence of runs I don't remember taking. The park is waiting. The Ramble is waiting. And somewhere in those dark, twisting paths, it's waiting too. This time, I won't look back. This time, I'll follow the rule. Unless that's exactly what it wants me to do. I entered Central Park at East 72nd Street at 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes early, but I couldn't wait in my apartment any longer. Every minute that passed felt like it was stretching, distorting, becoming something other than a normal unit of time. The walls were pressing in. I needed to move. The park at midnight is a different world. The tourists are gone. The joggers are gone. Even most of the homeless people who sleep on benches have found their spots for the night and settled in. The street lamps cast islands of light in an ocean of darkness, and between those islands, anything could be hiding. I'd dressed in my usual running gear, black leggings and a gray tank top, but I'd added a headlamp this time. If I was going into the Ramble at midnight, I wanted to see what was coming. My phone was in my armband with the GPS tracking app running and sharing my location with my roommate Melissa. If something happened to me, at least they'd know where to find my body. That thought should have scared me more than it did. But after 3 weeks of being stalked by something that defied explanation, after 3 weeks of waking up exhausted with dirty shoes and no memory of where I'd been, fear had transformed into something else. Determination, maybe. Or resignation. Or maybe just the desperate need to end this one way or another. The path into the Ramble was exactly as I remembered. Trees closing in overhead, shadows pooling between the street lamps, the distant sounds of the city muffled to almost nothing. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness, illuminating leaves and branches and empty path ahead. Nothing moving, nothing waiting. Yet. I checked my phone. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes until midnight. I kept walking deeper into the Ramble, following the same route I'd taken 3 weeks ago. Part of me expected to hear the footsteps start immediately. But there was only silence. Not the unnatural, pressing silence from before. Just normal quiet. Wind in the trees. A siren somewhere far away. My own breathing. At exactly 11:58 p.m., my headlamp flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. I smacked it with my palm, but it was dead. And a second later, every street lamp in the Ramble went out simultaneously. Perfect darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't exist in New York City. The kind that makes you remember humans are diurnal creatures who aren't designed to navigate without light. I pulled out my phone to use its flashlight, but the screen was black. Dead battery, even though it had been at 93% a minute ago. "Okay," I said out loud, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here. I came like you asked. What do you want?" The footsteps started. Behind me. Close behind me. Not matching my rhythm this time because I wasn't moving, just steady, measured footfalls approaching from the direction I'd come. Each step deliberate. Each step closer. I remembered the rule. Don't look back. But I'd already looked back in my dream, hadn't I? It had already seen me. So what difference did it make now? "I know you're there," I said, still facing forward, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I know you've been following me. So let's talk. Let's figure out what this is." The footsteps stopped. Right behind me. Close enough that I should have been able to feel body heat, hear breathing, sense another person's presence. But there was nothing. Just the footsteps' echo fading into silence. Then I felt it. A cold that had nothing to do with October night air. A cold that started at the base of my skull and spread down my spine like ice water being poured directly onto my vertebrae. And with that cold came a voice. Not spoken out loud, but somehow inside my head, resonating through my bones. "You broke the rule." "I know," I whispered. "In the dream." I looked back. The dream was real. Dreams are where we meet, where the barrier is thin. You saw me. I saw you. The contract was made. "What contract?" I didn't agree to anything. A sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could be made of grinding stone and breaking glass. "You run. I chase." That's the agreement. That's what this place demands. That's what it's always demanded. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of this. The park? Central Park demands this? The Ramble, the voice corrected. This place where paths twist and reality bends. Where the city's darkness pools and concentrates. It needs runners and chasers. It needs the hunt. For 160 years, it's had them. And now it has us. I forced myself to think past the fear, to use the part of my brain that solved problems and fixed injuries. There have been others before me? Other runners? Many others, dozens. Some lasted years before they were caught. Some lasted only days, but all of them ran. All of them fed the Ramble's hunger. And if I refuse? If I just stop running? The cold intensified until my teeth were chattering. Then I catch you. And you become me, and I finally get to rest. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The runner becomes the chaser. The chaser finds peace. The cycle continues. Understanding hit me like a physical blow. You were a runner once. Someone like me. I was Timothy Chen. I was 24 years old. I died in 1987. Officially, I died of exposure. They found my body near the Belvedere Castle after a winter storm. But that's not what killed me. I died because I stopped running. Because I was so tired, so exhausted from being chased every night, that I just gave up. And when I stopped, it caught me. And then I became it. 37 years, I breathed. You've been chasing people for 37 years? Longer than I was alive. Much longer. And I'm so tired, Jade. So tired of chasing, of hunting, of being the thing that makes people afraid of the dark. I want to rest. I want to be done. And you can give me that. All you have to do is stop running. So I can take your place? So I can spend the next 40 years chasing innocent people through this park? That's insane. That's not a choice. It's the only choice the Ramble gives. Run or chase, prey or predator. There is no third option. But there had to be. There was always a third option. I'd built my entire career on finding third options, alternative treatments when the obvious ones didn't work. Physical therapy was all about finding paths around limitations, ways to heal that weren't immediately apparent. What if we both stop? I asked. What if neither of us runs or chases? What if we just refuse to play the game? The cold withdrew slightly, and I sensed surprise in the silence that followed. No one has ever suggested that. Because everyone's too scared to think straight. But I'm a problem solver, Timothy. It's what I do. And the problem here isn't you or me. It's the Ramble itself. It's whatever force is sustaining this cycle. So what if we break the cycle? What if we deny it what it wants? It will kill us both. The Ramble doesn't tolerate defiance. Maybe. But at least we'll die as ourselves instead of as its puppets. At least the cycle ends with us instead of continuing with someone else. Isn't that better than dragging this out for another 40 years? Another long silence. When Timothy's voice came again, it sounded different, more human, more like the young man he'd been before he died. I don't know if I can. I've been this thing for so long. I don't remember how to be anything else. Then let me help you remember. That's what I do, Timothy. I help people remember how their bodies are supposed to work, how they're supposed to move. Maybe I can help you remember how to be human. The Ramble won't allow it. It's already getting angry. Can't you feel it? And I could. The air itself was changing, becoming thick and heavy like before a thunderstorm. The darkness seemed to press closer, and I could hear something in the distance. Not footsteps. Something else. A low rumbling sound like the earth itself growling. Then we need to move. Now, can you take physical form? Can I see you? If I do, you'll be frightened. Everyone is frightened. I'm already frightened, but I'd rather face you as you are than as a voice in the dark. There was a moment of hesitation. Then, slowly, the darkness in front of me began to coalesce, to take shape. And Timothy appeared. He looked almost human. Almost. The proportions were wrong, just like in my dream. Arms too long, joints bending at angles that shouldn't work. His face was pale, stretched too tight, and his eyes were completely black, reflecting no light. He wore running clothes from the 1980s, shorts and a tank top, but they were tattered and rotting, hanging off his frame like grave clothes. But beneath the horror movie exterior, I could see hints of the person he'd been. The shape of his face, the way he held himself, the sadness in those black eyes. "Hi, Timothy," I said softly. "I'm Jade. And we're going to end this. Together." His mouth moved, and this time the voice came from him instead of inside my head. Rough and unused, but real. "How?" "First, we get out of the Ramble. We break its hold on us by leaving its territory. Then we figure out the rest." "Can you leave? Or are you bound here?" "I've never tried. It never occurred to me that I could." "Well, let's find out. Take my hand." I held out my hand, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to run from this thing. Timothy stared at my hand like he'd forgotten what human contact felt like. Then, slowly, he reached out with one of those two long arms and placed his hand in mine. It was cold. Freezing cold. Like holding hands with a corpse. But it was solid. Real. And the moment our hands touched, I felt something shift. The rumbling around us grew louder, and the path beneath our feet began to shake. "It knows," Timothy said, his voice filled with fear. "It knows what we're trying to do. Run, Jade. Run now." We ran. But this time we ran together, hand in hand, sprinting through the darkness of the Ramble, while reality itself seemed to tear apart around us. The paths twisted and writhed like living things, trying to lead us in circles, trying to keep us trapped. Trees bent toward us, branches reaching out like grasping fingers. The ground buckled and heaved. I kept my headlamp off, relying on Timothy to navigate. He knew these paths better than anyone, had run them for 37 years. And slowly, fighting against the Ramble's resistance, we made progress toward the edge. Behind us, the rumbling resolved into something worse. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. All the runners and chasers from all the years. All the cycles that had fed the Ramble's hunger. They were coming for us, coming to stop us from breaking free. "Don't look back," Timothy gasped. "Whatever you do, don't look back." "I know the rule," I panted. "Keep going." "We're almost there." And we were. I could see it ahead, the edge of the Ramble where the trees thinned and the normal park began. 50 yards. 40. 30. The footsteps behind us were getting closer, and with them came voices. Screaming, begging, cursing. All the people trapped in the cycle, all of them trying to stop us from escaping, because if we escaped, what did that mean for them? What did it mean that they'd given up when we hadn't? 20 yards, Timothy's hand was getting warmer in mine, more solid, more real. Whatever force had sustained him as a monster was weakening as we approached freedom. 5 yards. The ground beneath us split open, a chasm yawning wide to swallow us. But we jumped, Timothy's inhuman legs giving us distance we shouldn't have been able to clear. We sailed over the gap and landed hard on the path beyond the Ramble's edge. The moment we crossed that invisible boundary, everything stopped. The rumbling, the footsteps, the screaming, all of it cut off like someone had flipped a switch. I looked back, breaking the rule one final time, and saw the Ramble behind us. It looked normal, just trees and paths and darkness. No gaping chasms, no pursuing horde. Nothing but a quiet section of Central Park at midnight. "Did we do it?" I asked, my chest heaving. "Are we free?" Timothy was on his hands and knees beside me, and as I watched, his form began to change. The wrong angles corrected themselves. His skin tone normalized. His eyes went from black to a deep brown. His clothes transformed from tattered rags to the actual running gear he'd worn in 1987. He looked up at me with human eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I can feel it. I'm not bound anymore. I'm not the chaser anymore. I'm just me." But his relief was short-lived. His body began to shimmer, to become translucent. "What's happening?" I grabbed his arm, but my hand passed through it. "I died, Jade. 37 years ago, I died. Without the Ramble's hold keeping me here, I can't stay. I have to go." He smiled, and it was a real smile, human and grateful. "Thank you. Thank you for remembering I was a person. Thank you for refusing to become what I became." "Timothy, wait," but he was already fading, his form dissipating like morning mist. The last thing I saw was his smile, and then he was gone. Truly gone. Finally at rest. I sat there on the path for a long time, catching my breath, processing what had just happened. We'd done it. We'd broken the cycle. The Ramble no longer had its chaser, and I was no longer its prey. But as I sat there, I became aware of something. A presence, multiple presences. I looked around and saw them. Dozens of translucent figures standing at the edge of the Ramble, watching me. All the other runners who'd been trapped in the cycle over the years. They weren't threatening. They were just watching, waiting. One of them, a woman who looked like she was from the 1960s, stepped forward. She couldn't cross the boundary, but she called out to me. "You freed one chaser, but there have been many, and they're all still in there, still hunting, still trapped. Will you free them too?" I looked at the Ramble, at the darkness between those trees, and felt my exhaustion deepen. We'd broken one cycle, but how many more were there? How many people were still trapped in that twisted space, running or chasing, unable to escape? "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "I barely made it out once." "But you did make it out," another ghost said, a man in modern running gear. "You're the first runner in over a century to escape. You know the way now. You could show others. Or," the woman continued, "you could walk away. Leave the park. Never come back. No one would blame you. You've earned your freedom." She was right. I had earned my freedom. I could walk away right now, go back to my apartment, move to a different city, never think about Central Park again. Let someone else deal with the Ramble's horrors. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. Because I was a physical therapist. My whole career was built on helping people recover from injuries, from trauma, from limitations. And these people, these trapped souls, they needed help more than any patient I'd ever treated. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking with exhaustion. "I'll come back," I told the ghosts. "I need to rest, to recover. But I'll come back. And I'll help as many as I can." The woman smiled. "Thank you. We'll be waiting." The ghosts faded, returning to whatever liminal space they inhabited. And I was alone on the path, the normal sounds of the city returning to my ears. Car horns, sirens, the ambient noise of New York at night. I walked toward the park exit, but something made me pause and look back one more time. In the darkness of the Ramble, I thought I saw movement, a figure standing beneath the trees, watching me. But it wasn't Timothy. This was someone else. Another chaser, still trapped, still hunting, still waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to set them free. I turned away and kept walking. Tonight had been about survival and breaking one cycle. Tomorrow would be about planning, about figuring out how to safely navigate the Ramble's horrors and free the others. But as I exited the park at East 79th Street, I felt something in my pocket that hadn't been there before. I pulled it out and found a small, folded piece of paper. When I opened it, I recognized the handwriting. Timothy's, but cleaner now. More controlled. Not the distorted writing from the note that had lured me here. Thank you for giving me peace. But be careful. You've made the Ramble angry. It will try to claim you again. Remember the rule. Don't look back, unless you're ready to face what's following you. I crumpled the note and shoved it in my pocket, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the October night air. The Ramble was angry, and angry supernatural entities rarely just let things go. I walked faster, heading toward home, very carefully not looking at any reflective surfaces, not checking behind me, following the rule. Because if I looked back and saw something following me, I'd have to deal with it, and tonight, I'd dealt with enough. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out how to save the others. Tonight, I just needed to survive. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Ramble wasn't done with me. That breaking one cycle had just drawn me deeper into something much bigger and much darker than I'd imagined, and that the real nightmare was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Timothy's face transforming from monster to human, saw the gratitude in his eyes before he faded, saw those dozens of ghost runners standing at the Ramble's edge, waiting for someone to save them, too. Around 4 a.m, I gave up trying to sleep and made coffee. My apartment's kitchen window faces east, and I sat there watching the sky slowly lighten, going from black to deep blue to that pale gray that comes right before dawn. My running shoes sat by the door, still dirty from my midnight run through the Ramble, but this time I knew the dirt was real. This time I remembered every step. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa, my roommate who was staying at her boyfriend's place. GPS says you got home at 1:30 a.m. You okay? That's a really late run. I typed back, I'm fine. Just couldn't sleep. Thanks for tracking me. I didn't tell her the truth. How could I? Hey, Melissa, I freed a tortured soul from a supernatural hunting ground in Central Park. But there are dozens more that need help. And oh, by the way, the park itself is pissed at me now. She'd have me committed. Over the next week, I tried to return to normal life. Went to work, treated patients, pretended everything was fine. But my mind kept circling back to the Ramble, to those ghost runners, to the woman in 1960s clothes who'd asked if I would help them too. I started researching. The New York Public Library's archives became my second home. I pulled every newspaper article about disappearances in Central Park, going back to its opening in 1857. The pattern was there once you knew to look for it. Every few years, someone vanished in or near the Ramble, usually a runner or jogger, sometimes a hiker who'd stayed too late. Bodies were rarely found, and when they were, the causes of death were always vague. Exposure, heart failure, unexplained. But I found something else, too. References to the old rules in journals and diaries from the 1800s. Urban legends that predated the park itself. Stories about the land it was built on. This area had been known as a dangerous place even before Central Park existed. The Native Americans who'd lived here had avoided it, called it a thin place where the barriers between worlds grew weak. When they built the park, they'd tried to tame it. Planted trees, carved paths, installed lamps. But you can't tame something fundamental. You can only paper over it. And in the Ramble, where the paths twisted and the trees grew thick, the thin place remained. Hungry. Waiting. The cycle of runner and chaser was just how it fed. It needed the fear, the chase, the inevitable moment when the runner either stopped or became the chaser. That energy sustained it. And when Timothy and I broke that cycle, we'd starved it. Made it angry. On the 7th night after my midnight run, I had a visitor. I was in my apartment alone, Melissa out again with her boyfriend, when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. The same rhythmic pace I'd heard in the Ramble, same perfect synchronization with my heartbeat. I froze, my hand halfway to my coffee mug. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. A long pause. Then 3 slow knocks. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The smart thing would be to not answer, to pretend I wasn't home. But I was so tired of being afraid, so tired of running from something I didn't understand. I opened the door. Standing in my hallway was a man in his 40s wearing a business suit from the 1970s. His eyes were the same black pits I'd seen in Timothy's face before he transformed. His proportions were wrong, limbs too long, joints bending backwards. Another chaser. Another trapped soul. "Jade Whitmore," he said in that echoing, wrong voice. "You broke the cycle. You freed Timothy Chen. The Ramble wants you to know it noticed." "Good," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "I want it to notice. I'm coming back for the others, all of them." The chaser tilted his head, studying me. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." The Ramble isn't just one place. It's a nexus point, a doorway. There are other thin places in this city, other hunting grounds. If you weaken the Ramble too much, you'll tear the barrier completely. You'll let things through that are far worse than us. That stopped me cold. What things? The Ramble keeps them out as much as it keeps us in. It's a valve, regulating the pressure between worlds. If you free all the chasers, if you break all the cycles, you'll destroy that valve. And the things waiting on the other side will flood through. So I'm supposed to just leave you all there? Let the cycle continue? Let innocent people get trapped? Better a few trapped souls than the entire city consumed by what lies beyond. The chaser stepped closer, and I could smell earth and decay. "This is bigger than you, Jade. Bigger than any of us. The Ramble is cruel, but it serves a purpose. Sometimes the lesser evil is the only choice." "I don't believe that. There's always another option. Always." "Then you're naive, or arrogant, or both." He turned to leave, then paused. "The Ramble sent me to warn you. Stay away. Don't come back. If you do, it won't just trap you. It'll make an example of you. It'll turn you into something worse than a chaser, something that will make people afraid to enter the park at all." "What's your name?" I asked before he could vanish. He looked back, surprised by the question. Marcus Webb. I died in 1973. 51 years, I said softly. You've been trapped for 51 years, Marcus. Don't you want to be free?" For just a moment, his expression flickered. The black eyes showed something human. Longing. Hope. Then it was gone, buried under whatever the Ramble had made him. "Wanting doesn't matter," he said. "Some cages are necessary. Remember that." Then he was gone, fading into nothing, leaving me alone in my hallway with a decision to make. I spent the next 2 days wrestling with it. Was Marcus right? Was the Ramble a necessary evil, keeping something worse at bay? Or was he just so beaten down, so worn, out from decades of being a monster, that he'd convinced himself his suffering had meaning? I called in sick to work, and spent those 2 days at the library, digging deeper. I found references to other thin places in the city. The abandoned subway platform at City Hall Station, where people reported hearing voices. The basement of the Merchant's House Museum, where time seemed to flow differently. The north woods of Central Park, where compasses stopped working, and people got lost even on clear days. All of them had their own cycles, their own patterns of tragedy that fed them and kept them stable. And all of them, according to the old journals, had grown quieter over the years. More contained. As if they were learning to self-regulate, using the cycles to maintain equilibrium rather than grow stronger. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe these places were valves, and breaking them open would be catastrophic. But I couldn't accept that. I couldn't accept that Marcus and Timothy and all those ghost runners had to suffer forever just to maintain some cosmic balance. There had to be another way. On the third night, I went back to Central Park. Not to the Ramble this time. To Belvedere Castle, the Gothic stone structure that sits on Vista Rock overlooking the Great Lawn. It's one of the highest points in the park, and according to my research, it's positioned exactly between the Ramble and the North Woods, between two thin places. If I wanted to understand what I was really dealing with, I needed a bigger perspective. I climbed to the top of the castle just before midnight. The city sprawled around me in all directions, millions of lights creating a false dawn. And from up here, I could see something I'd never noticed before. The dark places. Areas where the lights seemed dimmer, where the city's glow didn't quite penetrate. The Ramble was one, a pool of shadow in the park's heart. But there were others scattered throughout Manhattan. The abandoned subway platform, the North Woods, an old church in Hell's Kitchen, a stretch of the High Line that had never been renovated. Dozens of them, maybe more, all connected by invisible threads, all feeding off the same source. And in the center of it all, where all those threads converged, was something I'd never have noticed if I wasn't looking for it. A point of absolute darkness right in the middle of Times Square, the brightest, most crowded place in the city, and somehow no one saw the darkness at its heart. That was the source. That was what the thin places were connected to. And that was what would come through if I broke too many of the valves. I sat down hard on the castle's stone wall, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about the Ramble. It wasn't just about freeing trapped souls. This was about the entire infrastructure of supernatural containment that the city had unknowingly built around something dark and hungry and patient. My phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Hello, Jade." A woman's voice, warm and familiar, even though I'd never heard it before. "My name is Dr. Catherine Torres. I'm a professor of folklore at Columbia University, and I think we need to talk about what you've discovered." "How did you—" "I've been monitoring the thin places for 20 years. When you freed Timothy Chen, it sent ripples through the network. I've been waiting to see if you'd figure out the bigger picture. Clearly you have." "So, it's true? These places are keeping something contained?" "Yes and no. It's more complicated than that. Can we meet? There's a diner on Broadway and 112th. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. I'll explain everything." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long moment, looking out at the city, at the dark places hiding in plain sight. Then I climbed down from the castle and headed home. But as I walked, I felt it again. That presence, that sensation of being followed. I remembered the rule, don't look back. But this time, I had to know. I stopped walking and turned around. Nothing. The path behind me was empty, but in the shadows between the street lamps, I thought I saw movement. Not one figure, multiple figures. All the chasers from all the thin places, watching me, waiting to see what I'd do next. I turned back around and kept walking, my heart racing. Whatever I'd started when I freed Timothy, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And tomorrow, I'd start to understand just how big. The next morning, I met Dr. Torres at the diner. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. Over coffee and eggs, I couldn't eat. She told me the truth. The darkness in Times Square has been there for 400 years, since before the city existed. The thin places aren't keeping it contained. They're feeding it, keeping it satisfied so it doesn't need to grow. Every soul trapped in those cycles, every runner and chaser, every person lost in the North Woods or the abandoned subway platform, they're all sacrifices. Food for something that would consume the entire city if it wasn't constantly fed. So, Marcus was right, breaking the cycles would be catastrophic. In the short term, yes. But here's what Marcus doesn't know, what none of the chasers know. The entity is dying. Very slowly, but dying. Every year it needs less food, controls a smaller territory. In another century, maybe 2, it will fade completely. But only if we maintain the current balance, only if we keep the thin places active. I stared at her. You're asking me to accept that people need to suffer for another 100 years? I'm asking you to see the bigger picture, to understand that sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. She leaned forward. But I'm also telling you that there might be another way. A way to accelerate the entity's decline without breaking the valves. It would require going into Times Square, into that point of absolute darkness, and confronting what's there directly. And doing what? Starving it, cutting it off from the thin places one by one, safely while keeping it contained. It would take years, maybe decades, and it would be dangerous, but it might free the trapped souls without destroying the city. I thought about Timothy, finally at rest. About Marcus, resigned to 51 years of suffering and counting. About all those ghost runners waiting for someone to save them. I'll do it, I said. Whatever it takes. Dr. Torres smiled sadly. I thought you'd say that. But before you commit, you should know the cost. To enter that darkness and survive, you'd need to become something else. Something between human and chaser. You'd need to let the Ramble mark you, claim you partially, while keeping enough of yourself to resist total transformation. You'd be forever changed, Jade, forever connected to these thin places. Like becoming a permanent runner? Always having to watch over my shoulder? Something like that. But also having the power to navigate between worlds, to help trapped souls, to slowly dismantle the network from inside. You'd be the first person to willingly take on that role. I thought about my career, my normal life, the person I'd been before I ran through the Ramble 3 weeks ago. That person was already gone, changed by what I'd seen and experienced. The only question was whether I'd let that change destroy me or define me. When do we start? I asked. Over the next months, Dr. Torres trained me, taught me the old rules, the real rules that governed the thin places, showed me how to navigate the Ramble without being trapped, how to communicate with the chasers and the ghost runners, how to slowly, carefully begin freeing souls without destabilizing the network. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, and I paid the price she'd warned me about. The Ramble marked me, claimed part of me. Now when I run through Central Park, I can see things other people can't. The thin places, the threads connecting them, the entity in Times Square slowly shrinking, slowly dying. And sometimes when I'm running alone at night, I hear footsteps behind me. But they're not chasing me anymore. They're running with me. Timothy and Marcus, and all the others I've freed over these months. Ghost companions on a journey that might take the rest of my life. I still work as a physical therapist, still help people recover from injuries. But now I have other patients too. Souls trapped between worlds, waiting for someone to show them the way out. Last week, I freed Marcus. He cried when he transformed back to human, just like Timothy had. And just before he faded, he thanked me, said he'd been wrong to try to stop me, said hope matters more than balance. There are still dozens of chasers left, still thin places scattered throughout the city, still an entity in Times Square that needs to be confronted eventually. The work is far from over, but every soul I free makes the entity weaker. Every cycle I break safely makes the final confrontation more possible. And every night when I run through the Ramble, I remember the rule. Don't look back, unless you're ready to face what you find. I look back now, every time, because I'm not running from the darkness anymore. I'm running toward the light, one freed soul at a time. And someday, maybe in my lifetime, maybe after, the entity will fade completely. The thin places will close, and people will be able to run through Central Park at midnight without fear. Until then, I run, I watch, I help those who need it, and I remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is break the rules everyone says must be followed. Even if it changes you forever. Especially if it changes you forever.